Yo, call me a mimic you the way I mimicked your father never coming back. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the Games Kids. Today, and only today, we are here to talk about Sega, right? Obviously, you know, we're going to talk about Sonic and stuff, but I just want to kind of sit here and talk about like what happened with Sega, how we've gotten to this incredible point where Sega is basically in their golden era, their best bag they've been in probably since the 90s, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into it. So I figured I'd talk a little bit about, you know, obviously the beginning, middle times of the 2000s, and where we are at, and how Sega has the potential now to be one of the biggest and boldest since the 90s again. And of course, if you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to your boy, support the content, and become a YouTube member for the weekly Games Cage Yaps with a guest on whatever topic I'd like to discuss. Now let's talk about this. So Sega, right? Obviously a company that we know the beginnings, right? I mean, Sega's been a company that's been around for a long time, I believe since like the 40s or 50s, and they've been doing stuff for a while. And we all know the beginning story, right? They had a big boom in late 80s, 90s, having their own consoles, their own systems. But you know, we talk a lot about it a lot in the context of just Sonic, but people forget like Sega was huge and had a lot of really good IP that people really love. I mean, you think about to this day, people talk about stuff like back in the day, and that's why they do so many collections, right? You have your Crazy Taxis, your Streets of Rage, your Space Channel 5s, your Fantasy Stars Online, or for your Power Stones, like a bunch of IPs of theirs that people love so much from back in the day even, right? Like I know a lot of people, obviously to this day, the effects of Sonic are everywhere, right? If I was to look up here, I mean, you've had stuff like Bayonetta from them, you had Choo Choo Rocket from back in the day, you have, you know, Rise Star, you have Knights, like they just had so many franchises. You obviously have shit like Monkey Ball, right? Billy Hatcher, Golden Axe, right? Like Fantasy Stars, Shenmue, like these guys, House of the Dead, like Sega has so many established IP over the decades, right? But, you know, obviously in the 90s is where they stood out the most, right? You know, they were doing big output, and their whole flow was being the cool one, right? It was always that Sega had the cool edge, right? They were the ones that were like, you know, the edgy ones, right? Sega does what Nintendo don't. They would do the ads that would make fun of Nintendo, and I mean, that's why there was such a big rivalry between Sonic and Mario in, you know, the, you know, late, you know, I guess the 90s, and after 85, because I think Sonic didn't debut until 1991. But it's like there was that big debate for a long time, a big war, not just because, you know, of gameplay, but just because stylistically Sega handled things very differently, right? And I know there's a lot that goes into what happened to them and their businesses and failed console and stuff, but it happened, right? In the early 2000s, it all sort of came crumbling down for the company as they lost the console market of their own and just decided to go third party. And going third party wasn't entirely a bad idea for them, right? I mean, seeing Sonic on other consoles, seeing Sonic on, you know, Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo was a surreal feeling. You know, people forget that Sonic Heroes for the longest time was the best-selling game in the series just because of the fact that they were able to like have the franchise grow now. Like it was an IP that was established, and because you had stuff like Sonic X going on, as well as Sonic Heroes and Sonic Advance, like Sonic was able to find a new audience with the Nintendo crowd and with every third-party company. And honestly, the 2000s for Sega were kind of a weird period where they were doing some really good stuff, right? But like nothing they were doing was really, you know, game of the year worthy, and they were doing a lot of collections. I mean, the 2000s really were carried by a lot of Sonic. You gotta remember, there was a time where genuinely, like, Sonic was their only real cash cow, because you did have other stuff. Like, I know in the 2000s, they were releasing stuff like Outrun 2, they were releasing Monkey Ball on the GameCube, was becoming, you know, an established IP. Yakuza existed, but Yakuza was really only notable in Japan, right? You had stuff like Football Manager that people, right? You have Virtua Fighter that was still going on for a little bit. You had their arcades that were really popping in Japan, right? That was a major thing for Sega. A lot of the revenue came from their arcades, and people forget that Sega is also part of a big company called Sega Sammy, which is a business company. I think they do some pachinkos or some other stuff, but there is a business side to Sega that helps them financially. But yeah, in the 2000s, there wasn't really much going on for them majorly besides stuff like Fantasy Star, Miku, some Monkey Ball, you know, some other franchise, but it really was Sonic at the front road for them, right? And you know, this is, remember, people forget Sega didn't always own Atlas, right? Atlas acquisition and purchase didn't come until, I believe, 2013. And so that output really wasn't, you know, part of their life or lineage until much later, right? And then the 2010s hit, right? And again, we're looking back here at the 2000s era. Again, still no real Game of the Year worthy title from Sega. Not that that necessarily matters, right? At the end of the day, they just want to make games, but there really was a time where like Sega games were kind of just like, oh yeah, here's a Sega game. Oh, like, oh, here's Sonic. And obviously, you know, I'm happy about that. I grew up with Sonic. That was my bag, right? But there were some IPs, but they really did lean on a lot of collections, right? Like their back catalog was so good, right? Whether it was for Dreamcast or Saturn or whatever. And there's a reason why they were able to resell them a bunch and why they resold them. It's because people just really liked those old games and they just wanted an excuse to play them over and over. And then the 2010s happened. And I want to say the 2010s is really when the tide started shifting at Sega a little bit, because you think of the first half, it was, you know, mixed, right? The first half starts with a strong half with Sonic, right? Where you have stuff like, you know, Sonic Generations. You have, I guess Colors was a little early. Well, was it? No, I think Colors was 2010 or 2011. One of those years, because then we got Generations after that. But after, I mean, you guys know how it goes. I mean, we got Lost World, we got the Sonic Boom Initiative. So things, you know, sort of downscaled for Sonic, right? And then you have stuff like Bayonetta 2 that came out, but it was exclusive on Wii U. They banked on it with Nintendo as an exclusivity. And, you know, that did pretty okay on Wii U, but again, it was still like stuck on the Wii U. So nothing too crazy at home about. They did have some stuff like Alien games going on, some more remasters and collections, some Miku games. And again, there's definitely some little things I'm missing, but it really, we were still at that point. They had stuff like Sakura Wars, but it wasn't until, and this is my honest opinion, it wasn't until a little game called Persona 5 entered their life where I felt like things really changed. So Atlas announces Persona 5, and I think it was like winter. Remember, what was the joke? The initial reveal of Persona 5 was winter 2014, and ended up coming like April 2017. But you know, they started that marketing, right? And they acquired them. And the marketing buildup for Persona 5 was kind of unreal, right? We were starting to see this franchise that really wasn't big at all in the West, sort of gain traction and get its flowers, right? Because I guess you could argue Persona 4 Golden on PS Vita sold really well. And that was, you know, a big game for Atlas, right? It was a big deal. But it really, I mean, I think everybody forgets how Persona 5 really was a game changer. I mean, to this day, we can't go anywhere without seeing Joker or some sort of that red and black aesthetic, that look, those characters, right? Just because like it hit so hard. I mean, we're talking about a JRPG that sold what, like 5 to 7 million copies, which people were forgetting. Like, and then this is something I always tell people, like, who'll forget in the 2010s, JRPGs were on a downward spiral, right? Like in Japan, they were doing well, but in the West, like the idea of like a JRPG like selling super well was really fading. I mean, you really only had, I guess, FF15 at the time, which was meant to be like the big savior, and even then they moved away from turn-based, right? They went to an action game for FF15, and look how much marketing that took, right? But I feel like the age of a modern turn-based RPG, like Japanese RPG doing well in the West, felt like a foreign concept. People wanted action, they were moving on to open world, and things, the tides were shifting for the games industry, right? And so boom, Sega Atlas released Persona 5, and you are just getting accolades left and right? And that is in 2017. But again, another game came out in the West in 2017 that was out in Japan, I believe, in 2015. And that was a little game you might know as Yakuza 0. Now, Yakuza 0, right, is crazy, right? Because this was a game that was basically meant to be, you know, a prequel reintroduction for the franchise for the PS4, and ended up blowing up in the West. I think the game has sold now over 2 million copies, but again, people forget that is a big deal, right? You gotta remember Sega's metrics for sales, like if a game sells like a few million, I mean, that's huge for them, right? But I think the biggest thing to understand here is that like Persona and Yakuza went from two franchises that really were mainly popular in Japan and had some popularity, now are suddenly like one of Sega's most important franchises. I mean, you guys know the story from here, right? I mean, with Persona 5, after that, it was history, right? We've got Persona 5 Royal ever since. We got Persona 5 Strikers. We got the Phantom Thieves in every game ever. We've gotten Persona 3 Remake. We got the re-release of Persona 4 Golden on consoles. We had the HD remasters of 3, 4, and 5 released on Nintendo Switch, right? And then we even had the remake of Persona 3 Reload. And this isn't even me counting games like Persona Q2, Persona, what's the other one? The turn-based tactical one. There was, I think it was Persona 5 Tactics or whatever. But yeah, like we are talking about a series that just left and right continued to get video games, products, and even anime, right? And that's just how big the series became in the West. I mean, I feel like everybody knows Persona now. Even if you don't, care about the games or play it, I feel like if you're in the gaming space, you've heard of Joker, right? And obviously, Smash Bros. It was another big deal, right? You had the big reveal of Joker and Smash at the Game Awards, and people forget how big that Smash Bros. Buff. I mean, you think about what? If Smash Bros. Has sold 30 million copies, at least 25 million of those people are aware of Joker's existence. You know what I mean? Or 20 million of them if they've even seen that DLC. So I think that alone was huge for the company, and it made Persona one of their main pillars. But I can't forget about Yakuza. I mean, with Yakuza, like, you gotta remember, like, we went from 0, and then, bro, I want you guys to know this, right? I want you all to really understand how crazy RGG Studios is, right? These are the guys that built Yakuza 0. I want you to know how insane their fucking output is. So they released Yakuza 0 in 2015 in Japan, comes out in 2017 in the West. Then in 2016, I believe in Japan, but they come out later, they made Yakuza Kiwami and Yakuza 6, right? Yakuza Kiwami is a remake. In 2017, they made Yakuza Kiwami 2. In 2018, they did the remaster of Yakuza 3. They worked on that new IP, Judgment. They released Fist of the North Star, Lost Paradise. In 2019, they dropped Yakuza 4 Remaster, Yakuza 5 Remaster, and they worked on Monkey Ball Banana Blitz HD. In 2020, they released Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is Yakuza 7. They released in 2021 Judgment Remastered, Virtua Fighter 5 Remaster, Lost Judgment, which is the sequel to Judgment, Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania. And then 2 years later, 2023, they released Like a Dragon Ishin, Like a Dragon, The Man Who Erased His Name, and then in 2024, Infinite Wealth and Banana Rumble. You want to talk about a company that knows their shit and knows what they're doing and knows how to work, efficiently and hard? That's RGG Studios, right? And these games have blown up. I mean, they are selling incredible amounts of copies with Yakuza. And you gotta remember, what's so good about Yakuza is it doesn't take 1 trillion copies to be a success. It can sell 2 to 3 million. I mean, yeah, they were championing Yakuza Infinite while selling like 1 million copies within its first month of release, right? So I'm guessing by this point it's probably at 1.5, 2 million. But that's what's so good about Sega is it doesn't take 5, 10 million units to be a success for them. They can have a game that's a success as long as it even sells a few million and hits their metrics. Even something like silly in 2017 that Puyo Puyo came out with Puyo Puyo Tetris on the Switch was really successful, and we've gotten a lot since then. And even then, right, in 2017, alongside Yakuza 0 and Persona 5, while Sonic Forces was of course a blemish, we did also have Sonic Mania that year, which sold super well, reviewed super well, and really I still think, even though Forces did a lot of damage, I still think Mania brought a lot of goodwill. But I think it also put Sega into a perspective of be like, guys, I think we don't just have to rely on Sonic anymore, right? And I think that's the big thing with Sega is I think they found, which they dubbed this today, their 3 big pillars, right? Because they have their side series that sell super well that we don't really talk about. Like, I know they publish some of the Warhammer games that sell super well. I know they publish, Football Manager that does really well. But, right, their big 3 pillars are now Yakuza, Persona, and Sonic. And while Sonic is still the dominant IP just because of, mobile games and obviously lineage and history and, platformers being a bit more accessible, we are seeing sales numbers for Persona and Yakuza that are incredible. I mean, Persona 5 has outsold a lot of 3D Sonic games, right? Most 3D Sonic games sell up to, 4 million copies at like the height, right? And you have a game like Persona 5 with all its remasters, re-releases, and everything now that's at about like 6 to 7 million units, which is kind of unbelievable stuff to see, right? And so while Sonic is still their pillar, they have, you know, they have some leeway, right? And people just associate this series with Sega. And I think what's really cool about Sega too is just that like now they're at the point where they're able to flex their wings, right? They've made a lot of money off of those IPs, and that's why they even started the HD remaster initiative. I remember a few years back, Sega said that they wanted to invest in more remasters and remakes, right? Thus what happened with Yakuza, right? Where they did remakes of, you know, Kiwami, and they did remakes of some of the 1, 2, and 3, thus even getting Sonic Colors remastered, right? Thus getting even Sonic Origins Plus, getting the old Persona games remastered. We're getting Monkey Ball Banana Mania, which was like a remaster remake of the original trilogy, like, and now we even have, you know, the rumors that they're remaking Jet Set 1 alongside the new Jet Set. So I think Sega really understands that they have IP that are valuable, and instead of just doing these little collections, what if we really bring our IPs to the forefront with remasters and remakes? Especially like when it comes to Sonic, we've talked about this before. We don't have enough remasters of 3D Sonic games. We do have Sonic Gens now, which has had incredible success with the Shadow Generations content in it, right? We've had Sonic Colors, which was, you know, middling success, but I think Sonic Gens proved like, all right, we're not working with that team anymore, right? Let's work on these remasters internally, which is what they did, and they worked on Shadow Gens within that. So I hope we see more remasters within that. I mean, you even think about Atlas with Sega, how, you know, they remaster some of their SMT games, right? They have SMT 5 Vengeance super well, like SMT is doing well. It is unbelievable to see everything they're doing, including their Sega Super Revival Initiative, right? If you guys remember at the Game Awards, what was it now? I want to say like 3 years ago, right, at the Game Awards, where they announced, you know, IP revivals, and they were like Streets of Rage is coming back with the 3D game, Shinobi, what's it called, the Golden Axe, and what's the other one, you know, Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio. Like they announced like 4 or 5 games all getting some kind of revitalization, which we have yet to see, but it shows an investment in their IPs. It was something they set out and announced just to be like, hey guys, like the Sega you grew up with and that people thought was cool in the 90s is what we want today. And a big reason for that is their current CEO, Shuji Itsumi. He actually had like a really long recent interview, right? That obviously I'm not gonna, you know, fully quote, but something that really stuck out that he said to me, well, he didn't say it to me, right? That he said, right? He said, Itsumi, when he joined last year, said, when I joined, Sega was more in defensive mode. It was trying to focus more on cost cutting, controlling the budget, sticking to the current plan. It was very conservative. Even though the market was showing that it was a very interesting time for growth opportunities, Google was getting into the cloud gaming market. Microsoft was starting to push Game Pass. Everybody was trying to get into the game market, and Sega has many great IPs, but it wasn't really doing anything with them. At the time I rejoined, Yakuza was playing a central role in both terms of studio and IP. Since they had the Japan-centric mindset, Sega as a whole was in a similar situation. Therefore, I decided to position Sonic, Persona, and Yakuza as the pillars to go global. To me, Sonic is the face of Sega. So if you make Sonic, Sonic needs to be, how can I say, we didn't have any stars at the time, so I wanted Sonic to be a star again, so Sega could come back. It's symbolic. And the last thing he said that I love so much is Sega had that kind of style back then. Sega's position was like, if you have attitude, Sega's the company for you, rather than Nintendo, because of the games, because of the style, because of coolness, or because of the kind of attitude. We have such a beautiful content value in Sega and some other IPs, so we're trying to revive it with a little bit of flavor of hip-hop now. And so to me, that just strikes me as a company that, and which I've always loved about Sega, is like, their games are cool, right? When you think of Sega's games, they are cool, right? You think of Yakuza, it hits that a little older demographic, it has that goofiness, but it has like raw energy in it, right? You think of something like, I don't know, Persona, right? With how stylized the UI is and gameplay wise, right? You think of even in the recent State of Play, we got that game Shinobi, right? That Shinobi remake or new game that they're making, and look how gorgeous it looks, right? Like, we're looking at a company that understands the type of IP that they have and are willing to stretch them, because we complain so much about how companies nowadays just sit on their IPs, right? You know, we just don't see any of their old IPs come back just because they don't make $1 billion and they're not games as a service. Whereas like Sega right now is just throwing everything at the wall. You're getting Sonic, you're getting Persona, you're getting Yakuza, you're getting Monkey Ball, you're getting, you know, Crazy Taxi. We're gonna get Jet Set back. You know, we're living in an era where so many of their IPs, they even bring stuff like SMT. You know, I feel like what's so nice about it is seeing all these franchises return. I expect more, right? I expect them to do more remakes, more remasters, and I expect that, you know, it's all succeeding in some way. I mean, I haven't even talked about Metaphor yet. Like last year, you know, Atlas released Metaphor, which was a massive Game of the Year winner in a lot of websites. You know, that was huge, right? And again, of course, that's under Atlas, but you know, Sega owns that shit. Right, at the end of the day, like, that is a big deal that we are seeing, you know, Sega at that point where they can get Game of the Year worthy nominees and games, right? And we're even seeing it with Sonic, right? We're seeing Sonic finally. I feel like, especially, I think this is due in part to the films too. Like, ever since 2020 and later, Sonic has finally been on an incredible upswing. I mean, obviously, if you follow this channel, you know the rigmarole, right? It's like Sonic movie success, big money. That money went into Sonic Frontiers. Sonic Frontiers releases, mega huge success. We've had Sonic Movie 2 be a success now. Sonic Movie 3, Shadow Generations be a huge success. And they are just pumping something Sonic now regularly, right? They found a proper pipeline for this series, right? Now we're able to get a Sonic racing game like Crossworlds that actually looks ambitious, right? And looks like it's gonna have a bunch of content and cool ideas, right? We're getting 2D games, we're getting, you know, symphonies worldwide, we're getting remasters. Like, they are going all in on all their franchise. And I think for me, the most important thing that I hope that Sega continues to do and continues to invest in is continue to have your hands everywhere, right? Like, continue to have a wide range of IPs, because I really do think, like, in the same way Capcom had a golden era like a few years back, right? Like, I mean, everybody knows the Capcom success story, right? Like, it was like they were in the dumps during the PS3 era, and then boom, PS4 era showed up, and they're like, oh, Resident Evil 7, 8 are crazy, right? Boom, DMC 5, boom, Monster Hunter is the biggest IP we've ever had. Like, boom, we're reviving this, that. Like, Capcom just randomly woke up one day and decided, no, let's just make things people want. And at the end of the day, that's the best thing I want, is I want Sega to be like, guys, what do people want? Let's just do that. You know, let's just make the cool shit people want from us, right? It's like a Year of Shadow, boom. All right, Sonic movie with super fights, boom. Right, Yakuza, all right, they want all those old games they can never play, boom. All right, new Yakuzas have a mix of action and turn-based, boom. Persona series evolving, boom. Metaphor, like everything. It's like Crazy Taxi, fuck it, we're bringing it back, right? Jet Set, all right, sure. And they know Jet Set is not a game that's gonna sell 5 million copies, but all that matters is they sell enough to make enough. And I love companies that do that. It reminds me so much of Nintendo, right? If you look at Nintendo, in their last quarterly investors meeting, they showed that 72 first-party games, or, you know, at least exclusive games on Switch, have sold over 1 million copies. And what I love about Nintendo is that's enough. That's okay. Now, granted, are all those series gonna get, you know, 50 sequels? No, right? But it's cool that they're trying, and it's cool that they're willing to invest in something that'll just sell 1 million or 2, right? Because as long as you're not fucking spending years and years of budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars on a franchise, if you spend the appropriate budget to make it, and then you're getting the appropriate amount of return, then boom, we're in a great place. Now, the only concerns I would have with Sega is what's going on with their big super game. Right now, they've talked about for a while now how they're making a super game, and I still have no fucking clue what that means, nor what they're talking about. I mean, I've tried to sit through articles reading about it. It seems like it's gonna be some big multiplayer game, but it also sounds like it could be like what they're calling their new games that are coming out that are just really high budget, like maybe the next Sonic game or the next like Yakuza game. I don't know. I still am not sure. If you guys have any ideas or thoughts, please let me know in the comment section below what you think. But yeah, I feel like besides that, I think they're doing fine, right? And their profits are up for the most part, right? And obviously there's some quarters that are better than others for them. But yeah, I think this is really where we're at with Sega and how far we've come, because we're really looking at a company that after the 90s struggled for a long time. I mean, I really don't think until, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't think until mid 2010s that Sega was really on the up. There was a long, man, people forget this. there was a long ass time where people were just like, is Sega gonna die? Is Sega gonna be acquired? Like, what's going on with them, right? Remember all the rumors of Sega being acquired by Microsoft, and the only reason that was, you know, a possibility to a lot of people was just because really, besides Sonic and maybe like a few other IPs and games, people were like, well, it doesn't look like these guys are doing great. But hey, man, a fire lit, and I'm so glad that they are thriving right now, because again, at the end of the day, more games for us, more hype, and really the future is looking extremely bright. I wonder what's gonna be another pillar for them, because I think right now they have Yakuza, Sonic, and Persona as their top three, but I wonder if they'll ever create a new IP that's as big. But I really hope, you know, something like Jet Set really thrives. I hope the IPs that they're investing in to bring back are really good. And I hope, one thing I really want is I would love if Sega collaborated a bit more, you know? Give me some Sega with some Capcom work, you know what I'm saying? Do more stuff like Mario and Sonic at the Olympics, but don't have it be the Olympics, right? Do more fun crossovers. I think it would be cool. I didn't even think like within the company, I feel like they used to do a lot more of like their Sega Superstars games, and I feel like now of all times would be the best time to reinvest in that, right? Could you imagine a Sega Superstars All-Stars game now that we have, you know, Joker that's really popular, or any of the Persona pop characters that are super popular, interacting with the Sonic gang, interacting with Yakuza characters, like that shit would be awesome. But yeah, so guys, that's really all I want to say. I'm just really excited. I'm really happy. Just wanted to yap a bit about State of Sega. What do you guys want the most from the company? What excites you the most? What fears do you have? What concerns? Let me know everything in the comment section below. Guys, I love you. Thank you all for watching. You're the best. And of course, I will see you all next time. Peace out.